We understand that Ohio has a real serious funk connection, you know, almost like Detroit. Can you tell us about some of the bands who are from Ohio?
Yeah.
You know, name off a few.
Ohio players. Yes, if we didn't know. And the group Dayton. And Roger and Zapp. And you got Bootsy and his whole brigade. There's the brothers that did the thing with Gladys Knight. That was from what is that group? Midnight Star and all that. There's quite a bit of talent from that area. I mean, there's even talent up in there now that's like, you know, it hasn't been exposed yet, but the potentials. Babyface and them came through there. Babyface was from Indiana, but he, you know, his roots as far as getting locked into the professional thing, you know, he was based out of Cincinnati. Yeah. So it's a lot of interesting people up in that area. A lot of good music.
Can you tell us about the first time that you had met Jimi Hendrix?
Well,
the circumstances behind it?
The situation was this. Jimi Hendrix, Bootsy met Jimi Hendrix. Jimi Hendrix came to Bootsy when he was going through that phase of doing the band of Gypsies. And he wanted Bootsy and his brother, and I believe at the time Frank, and some of the members that they had as house guests to be like his band. And Bootsy was working with James Brown at that time. And Bootsy basically, they turned it down because they didn't want to be disloyal to James. And Jimmy didn't want to put the pressure on him that, hey, you got to tell James that you're leaving. Because back at that time, most of the artists that was out there, they had this thing about being loyal. You know, they would, like, say for instance, if Otis Redding had a crew over here, he wouldn't try to talk Maceo into leaving from James Brown. But if Maceo wasn't with James Brown, he could have had a, you know, easy swing right into the Otis Redding thing. So it was kind of like that. I met Jimi Hendrix's father. His father came to our show in 1976 when we played in Seattle, Washington. His father and his brother Leon Hendrix. And then I was also very close, and still am very close to Jimi Hendrix, one of his main girlfriends named Lithafane Pridgeon, who was the spokesperson in the movie The Jimi Hendrix Story. So my closeness to Jimmy was basically his dad and Lithafane and his brother and stuff. As I said, Bootsy was the one that actually talked to Jimmy about doing a gig, you know, with Jimi Hendrix.
Also, there's a lot of funk bands who came after you guys who were really influenced by you guys. And one of the major successes, like Zapp, basically the track for probably the biggest hit record they had was basically done by George and Bootsy. Can you explain exactly what went on in that session and who did what?
Well, from what I remember, Roger was brought into the studio, and some members from his band, and Greg Jackson, and his brother Lester, and them. It was a few of us. It wasn't even the whole band that turned out to be the real performing band, but the essential members of the group. Anyway, basically, the record, More Bounce to the Ounce, was really cut by Bootsy. Bootsy did the guitars and everything. I'm trying to remember, I did so many drum tracks back in the days, I might have been the one that played drums on it, but I know that I had involvement in the background vocals and helping Roger coordinate the vocal arrangement and stuff. George is the one that talked him into, like, going the route, you know, with the talk box and everything. That's what brought that out. Because prior to that, Roger had a group called Roger and the Human Body, which Bootsy talked about so much. I didn't know who Bootsy was saying. When I first hooked up with Bootsy in '73, he was like, yeah, man, I'm gonna get this thing together, man. I get my thing together, I'm gonna do stuff with this guy named Roger. Yeah, Roger and the Human Body. So when I met Roger in the studio, I was like, okay, hey, how you doing, Roger? And we put together More Bounce to the Ounce. I went on later on to do stuff with him, like dance floor and all that kind of stuff. But yeah, the first stuff was actually done by Bootsy, mainly on guitars, the bass and stuff. I know Bootsy did, and Like I said, the drums are still questionable because I was cutting tracks at the time, cutting a barrage of tracks, and there may have been one that I did some drum tracking on, but I know that I did help him in the vocal aspect.
Okay, as far as the writing is concerned, as far as like hits like Tear the Roof Off the Sucker and Flashlight and Aqua Boogie, a lot of those songs sound like they were Bootsy's Rubber Band songs, tailor-made for Bootsy's Rubber Band, and they seem to somehow ended up with Parliament Funkadelic, or, you know, can you elaborate on that a little bit?
Yeah, well, that was the thing that kind of stuff commonly happened. We'd be in the studio and George come and say, yo, Bootsy, hey man, give me a hit, man, I need a hit. You know, and it's funny because, you know, we always, you know, our whole thing is always full of jokes. You know, we have a lot of fun and we joke with one another. We tell a lot of jokes and stuff. We call one another names and stuff, you know how it is, just coming up, kicking it with your brothers and stuff. And yeah, we had cut Flashlight as a rubber band track. So did we cut, so also we had cut Aqua Boogie, which was a track for the rubber band. As a matter of fact, that track, Aqua Boogie, was, when we actually went to perform it for the record, was the only thing that was on tape was a click machine and Bootsy playing like a rhythm guitar. And then the day that we decided to cut it as a record, Bernie Worrell went to the grand piano, I took the drums, and we played to that rhythm guitar and click. There was no vocals in sight, so the music arrangement took its own natural course to what it was going to be, because I was basically holding a James Brown groove on the drums, Bernie was holding like a pocket, and then all of a sudden he went into some, you know, out here somewhere type stuff. You know how Bernie is, and it became the record, man. Then we came back and put the bass synthesizer on and all that kind of stuff. Flashlight was cut as a rubber band rhythm track. Bootsy ended up putting the drums on Flashlight and bass and all that stuff, and then Bernie's bass synthesizer. Then we added vocals. And there was a few other tunes. As a matter of fact, on the Chocolate City album, there was a tune on Chocolate City called Together. Well, Bootsy and I had cut that tune when we had a group called Bootsy, Phelps, and Gary. We cut the tune, it was called Together in Heaven. And the original record kind of was like in the order of like when Larry Graham and them had out Can You Handle It? You know, because Bootsy basically was playing the same kind of equipment like Larry, you know, because Larry Graham turned him on to the Cell in Vegas and stuff, you know, and so it had that kind of feel in it. But for the record, it was a lot more smooth, I was a lot more mellower musically and everything. So yeah, we did quite a few tracks that was originally started off with the intent for us that ended up going to P-Funk.
Okay, it seems like you guys really, as far as the music, really peak at the right time. I think timing has a lot to do with how long a record becomes a hit and, you know, things of that nature. Mothership Connection was the perfect timing for us peaking of the P-Funk. The next era, I would say, would be like One Nation Under a Groove, and that was due to a new member, Jimmy Morrison. Can you explain what was going on around that time?
Well, at the time, One Nation was hitting. Yeah, Junie became a member, but that concept did come from George. As a matter of fact, that concept was so fresh and so raw with George that was the first concept that I was unable to interpret George, because George never came and played anything on an instrument. He never played a melody on a keyboard. He never got on a set of drums and said, here's the beat. He never got on the guitar and said, here's the chords. But George had a way of expressing an ideal, whether it was a guitar line or whether it was a bass line or whether it was a vocal melody. He had a way of expressing it with his voice. And for the most part throughout the years, I had always interpreted George. When it came down to One Nation, that was the first time that I was unable to interpret him. Junie came in, and Junie was able to hear it, and Junie developed a lot of the, you know, the vocal arrangements and everything for that and when we did the Motor Booty Affair and stuff, because Junie was very well versed in chords and had the ability to play all of the instruments. He was great with like voicing, knowing what would be the proper voicing for certain chords to merge with other ones and stuff. Knee Deep was a prime example of some of Juni's work. You're a Fish and I'm a Water Sign and all that stuff. All of that was like, you know, like the results of Juni's input. And as far as I'm concerned, even to this day, Juni not being an existing member present here, he's still been one of the greatest influences and instructors that have worked in conjunction with, of course, Bernie Worrell, but Juni as well, and then Glenn Goins, as far as being one of the greatest singers that has ever took presence in this organization.
When you guys worked with James Brown, which a lot of people don't know, in 1980, on a track called Go For Your Funk, it was never released. What was it like working with the Godfather in the studio as far as his professionalism and, you know, everything of that nature?
It was funny because the first thing I remember when he walked in the door, we was already cutting, and he walked in the door, and basically we stopped the session, and hey, how you doing, Mr. Brown, you know? And he said, yeah, I'm James Brown, and he did about 5 splits right in the studio. No music, did about 5 splits, and then everybody was like, James Brown, you know? So then we put the track back up and turned the music back on, and then he came on in and he started, you know, cutting with us. He was like, as he is, the one and only James Brown. I mean, his rhythm and his pocket naturally found him a place in the groove. He had no problem falling into the groove with that. Also at that time period too, Sly was cutting stuff with us too, because there are tracks that has like Sly, James, and us on it, you know. And James was definitely, and I still say to the day that he's probably one of the greatest inspirations to all of us outside of what we do. You know, his musical approach and the way he does things has a lot to do with how, especially as Rubber Band, how we dealt with a lot of things, especially dynamics on stage, you know, paying attention to the person that's up front, you know, so that, you know, that the whole thing moves with that leader, you know, because in James Brown, he couldn't be hollering, bring it up, bring it up. You know, the band down here, when he's bring it up, everybody's up, you know, and he throw his hands down, the band, bam, they got to be down with him. So he was like one of the best teachers for like to learn the concept of follow the leader, you know. And then George is like, you know, George is like one of the best directors. He calls himself a referee, you know, but George is like one of the best referees, leaders, directors that I've ever worked with too, outside of James Brown, because George, the first thing is always with the audience first. You know, he might have the want or the desire for a song to be at a certain tempo, but outside of that tempo, he's more or less concerned about where the audience is and where he can take them at. So you have to, in following George, you always end up giving the people what they want, what they need, what they came for, you know. And those kind of guys, man, is the cats that become the institutions of how you do it, you know.
Yeah, the funk is so deep that it's really hard to bottle it up in one interview, but one thing that kind of sticks out in my mind is all of these cats like Stanley Clarke, who are like just classically trained geniuses and all this and that, can be influenced by the funk, which really says something to me, because you can have all the technical skill and you don't write the right material. It's just